So it's that weird time of year, right? It's that weird time of year it happens. It's like a broken clock that's correct twice a day. There are 2 times per year for like a week each where you get up in the morning and you've got to dress like it's going to snow, and then by the middle of the day, you're sweating. What was it, like 45 degrees this morning, and it's supposed to be 95 by 4 in the afternoon? Is that right, Eddie?
I woke up and it felt like it was in a cooler, and I was like, oh, yes. That's how I knew I got a great night of sleep. Didn't wake up once. The dogs didn't wake me up, and I was like, ooh, this is nice.
Are you a crack the windows on cold night guy?
I would if I could.
I would if I could, he says.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair, what do you live in a jail?
Here's the thing. Olivia likes it toasty. I like it freezing cold.
Well, it's because you've got the insulation.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, she's the one that told you that. Good afternoon to you on a Tuesday. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you just heard. It is Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan on a day when we still bask in the glory of the Colts starting out 1-0. I've already seen the graphics. I've already seen the tweets, the posts, the Facebook, the Instagrams, the whatever else going around. Repost if your team is undefeated. There are 2 of them in the AFC South. Colts and the Jags off and running. There is one division that has 3 unbeaten teams. Actually, there might be 2 divisions that have 3 unbeaten teams. Eddie, would you like to guess?
3 unbeaten teams in one division?
Yes.
That would be the AFC or NFC West?
That is correct. The Rams, the Cardinals, and the Niners, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other one?
It's not the South.
Correct. It's not the South.
I have 2. The West has 3, right? AFC
That is
West?
correct. That would be the Las Vegas Raiders, right? Although, I mean, who did they beat? Did they beat Tennessee? Or no, they beat New England, right?
Yes.
That was the battle of which of us picked the teams that were going to have a better year than people thought. I said the Raiders. You said the Patriots.
I did.
New England still may. Who knows? So you have the Raiders unbeaten, the Chargers unbeaten, and then the team that's coming to Lucas Oil Stadium coming up this weekend in the pillow fight of unbeatens. The Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. It is the John Elway Bowl. It is the Peyton Manning Bowl. It's the unbeaten in 25 Bowl. And there's a lot to be optimistic about when it comes to the Colts based on what we saw Sunday. And we can get further into the areas that are of surprise, optimism, positive outlook, besides the quarterback position. And we can also get into areas that are giving us some, not pessimism, but keeping an eye on a possible reality. For example, the injury report. Defensive backfield is an area that, what have I always said? Sell chargers and sunglasses.
Yep.
Can never have too many. Just when you think you have the favorite pair, you realize you either lost them or you're like, where are they? Oh, gosh, I didn't realize they fell down in the seat. And, oh, wait, they're cracked. And that kind of holds true just in terms of, for the Colts, you know, the injury report coming off of game number 1. And we'll get into that. The other position that to me is of intrigue, and I think I'm alone on this island. It's me and a bloodstained volleyball alone on this island.
Wilson.
That's right. That was not a bad impersonation.
That wasn't even I wasn't even attempting.
Let me just tell you this. There are 2 scenes in the acting career of Tom Hanks where he has a character that's, you don't hear Tom Hanks. And then finally when he yells out, you can hear the Tom Hanks in him. One is in Forrest Gump when he yells, "Yes, drill sergeant." You're like, well, it's Tom Hanks. The rest of it, you know, he's got Forrest Gump. And then, but that one, "Yes, drill sergeant." And you're like, that's Tom Hanks. And the other one is when he yells out Wilson, because that's the only time he talks like in the whole movie, other than like once he's back. And then he says,
and his laugh.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that, where you now in the movie Castaway. By the way, I'm bringing this back into the NFL because that's what we do: is we intertwine and then I hook and ladder it back into the NFL. So in the movie Castaway, I watched that movie in the theater in the city of St. Louis. Now, Eddie Garrison, my trivia question for you: have you seen Castaway? Obviously, you have because you're familiar with the Wilson line. There was a scene in the movie Castaway when I saw it in the theater, and I was watching it in Creve Coeur, Missouri, which is basically the Carmel or the Westfield of St. Louis, and I'm sitting there watching it, and there is a line and a scene in the movie where the entire theater in St. Louis, Missouri broke into applause. Would you like to guess what it was?
No, thank you. I'll let you do it.
Caleb is in here observing and hanging out. Caleb, would you like to guess?
You'll find this out with me, Jake. There's a lot of movies I haven't seen, so I don't have an educated guess.
Okay, we'll let you retreat back to your island with your volleyball. Anybody have a guess? You can text me. 239-1070 is the text line that we have set up at the radio station here, or you can always do it on my personal text as well, which most people have that number, I think, stored into their phone. Yesterday, I got a chance to talk to Bud from Castleton. He had sent me a text. I called him up. We had a fabulous conversation, 20 minutes or so. Last night. Love doing it. But what scene was it, and for what reason, that people in St. Louis, Missouri broke out in applause when I was watching Castaway as it relates to the NFL? It is a direct NFL correlation. That's my question for you. But I'm alone on this island in the thought that I think there's the possibility. And I want to make emphatically clear, my name is Jake Query. I'm a radio host. This is not a report, what I'm about to say. This is strictly speculation, strictly tea leaves. I have not been told a single thing. I have nothing to base this on. I think I'm probably, I admittedly did not hear the guys this morning on the program. Maybe they brought it up, so maybe I have company on the island of which I'm unaware. But I'm pretty certain that I'm alone on this island. I think the Colts are putting themselves in position or preparing for the possibility that Jonathan Taylor, already through one game, is not 100%. It's hard to say because they, and to their credit, they were so in control of that game against Miami that you didn't need him late in the game. But And I thought, Giddens is a promising young player, and I like the versatility he brings. And then it goes without saying, you got the secret weapon. I mean, if all hell breaks loose, it goes without saying, right? Sure, you've got your thoroughbred. Sure, you've got your stallion there on the Polo Grounds, but we all know what the real McCoy is, right? Yes. Go into stable number 4 and find Ulysses Bentley and bring him out. He's been waiting for the moment. And yes, he got on the field on Sunday. But I noticed yesterday, and these things are so inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, usually. But I got super, intrigued. And literally, it popped off the page to me when I saw that the Colts yesterday signed a running back to the practice squad. And I thought, here we go. Here we go. This is what they're doing. They're lining it up because everybody, next man up. And then I saw that in order to make room for that, they waived a running back. I thought, okay, maybe then I'm getting a little too excited. But I am curious. I will simply say that I'm curious. We have a correct guess, by the way. Several people figured it out very quickly.
There's been a lot of texts coming in on the text line as well.
She doesn't say specifically that the Rams won the Super Bowl. But when he goes back and he says, and it's supposed to be a comic relief because this guy's been away for so long and whatever else, and he comes back and of course he lived in Memphis because he worked for FedEx, and he's like, let me get this straight. We have a football team now, and they used to be the Houston Oilers, and now they play in Tennessee. And she says, oh, yes, and it was so exciting. They almost won the Super Bowl. They lost by 1 yard. The place in St. Louis erupts into applause because, of course, it was Mike Jones that made the tackle a yard shy of Kevin Dyson, a yard shy of, a couple yards shy of the end zone, and the Rams won the Super Bowl. I don't believe they mentioned the Rams specifically, but the reference to the Super Bowl, literally the entire theater broke into applause. Eddie, the Indiana Fever are on their way to the WNBA playoffs, but
Yes.
there is a hurdle before that, and it is a big one, because you would think that because they have secured themselves a playoff spot, that the final game of the year is one that is just kind of a dress rehearsal. But there is a lot to be played for because of the seeding in the WNBA playoffs, and they need to get a win. They then need a couple of losses for Golden State. But what we know is the Fever final game is against an opponent that, yes, they defeated to win the in-season tournament, but it is a big one in terms of Minnesota, and that game is tonight, correct?
That is correct, Jake. 7:30 tonight. They won the WNBA Commissioner's Cup, not to be confused with the Emirates NBA Cup, formerly the in-season tournament.
Just the in-season tournament's what people
the
say.
Emirates NBA Cup, Jake. That's what it's called. Nafisa Kalio has already been ruled as
Do you
out
still call
tonight.
it? Do you still say the Willis Tower, or do you say the Sears Tower in Chicago? When you see the big building, do you say Sears Tower or Willis Tower?
I've only been to Chicago once.
And what did you say the big building was called?
No idea. I don't think I addressed it.
It's the Sears Tower. It'll always be the Sears Tower.
Does that
right?
surprise you? You've only been to Chicago one time.
That is a little surprising. For what reason were you only in Chicago? What was the reason that took you to Chicago?
I went to the Wrigley Field, watched the Reds Cubs.
And that was how long ago? Did you spend the night, or did you just drive in and out?
In and out.
That's not really doing.
I had to be in
Chicago.
high school, probably. So we're talking 7-8 years ago.
So you didn't notice the one big building? Like, I mean, that's a big skyline, but the big building they have that for many years was the tallest building in the world, like big kind of an attraction. Like when did you think it was weird that when you see like magnets or T-shirts that say Chicago, there's like usually the outline of one big building, and it seems to be kind of a staple.
Never saw that.
Didn't notice the big building that
No.
it has glass cubes on the top of it, but people can go up, and you know what I mean.
No.
Would you list yourself as an overly observant person?
No.
Yeah. Okay. You know
Yeah.
you're on Monument Circle, right?
No
There's a
Nafisa
monument right
Collier
out here.
tonight. Yeah, I know. No Nafisa Collier tonight for Minnesota. They're resting her. So Dejanay Carrington also out for the Lynx. So it looks like they'll still have some of their regular starters, but how much do they play is to be determined.
The Sears Tower is now known, I believe, as the Willis Tower, which is the dumbest thing ever because everyone still calls it the Sears Tower. Kind of like with the in-season tournament, you can just say in-season
Well,
tournament.
Jake,
Everybody
do you
knows
call
what
it
is.
Ruoff, or do you call it Deer Creek or Verizon or whatever it used to be?
Deer Creek.
Okay.
Yeah. I will occasionally say Ruoff now to differentiate from, because if I say like I have lawn seats at Deer Creek, then that could be confused with the lawn at White River, which is now the Everwise, But these sponsorships, I think there are still people that say Conseco Fieldhouse, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Hoosier Dome? I mean, it became the RCA Dome, but I think people, and now is RCA still around? Or is that gone too, like
Excuse me?
along with the Hoosier Dome? You know what I mean? I get very confused by all of that. But nonetheless, so tonight, Fever in action. Stephanie White going to join us coming up about 15 minutes from now on the program, and we will kind of set the scene. I've got one of the questions that I want to ask her is it difficult, do you think, or how do you, if you're the coach or in a workplace, you're a manager, you're whatever it might be, if you are a leader of a team, and a lot of the talking narrative is for this Fever team, for fans and media, is about who's not there, as opposed to those that are and that have earned this right. And so if they've earned that right, and if they, without Caitlin Clark, have put themselves in position to get in the playoffs, how do you coach up a group that has to constantly hear about what they aren't as opposed to who they are? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that is what have we talked about for 3 weeks? I mean, she's probably tired of me asking her about Caitlin Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Should I ask her that?
Do you think she's relieved to not be asked about Caitlin Clark anymore?
That's a good question. Let me write that down. I'm writing it down right now as we speak.
I wonder if if there was like a sigh of relief from the team as well. Not really a sigh of relief, but like, hey,
Well,
this
just
is
a
what
clarity,
we got,
right?
Yeah, clarity. you're not looking over your shoulder and wondering, hey, is she coming back? Is she coming back? But I'm sure deep down most of the people on the roster knew she wasn't coming back.
Now, do you want to know what I think her answer is going to be when I ask you this question? It's a great question.
Now, did you actually write this down, or are you just writing down words to act like you're writing down a question?
Are you relieved to not be asked about Caitlin Clark? It's right there.
Okay.
Here's my entire – people ask a lot about show scripts and things like that.
Well, Jake, we can't let them too much behind the – we let Caleb in. That's enough as it is.
There's my show notes. There's
wrong camera.
There's my script for today. 3 hours right there. I shouldn't be revealing that to the bosses. But you know what her answer is going to be? Well, Caitlin's a great player, and I think it speaks to what a great player she is, and it's a testament to her contribution not only in the WNBA but her place in women's basketball and what she means to this franchise. That I'm asked that a lot, so I understand the questions, and to an extent, it's part of the job, and it's an honor to be able to oversee this franchise that has such a great player on it. But at the same time, we still have games to win, and we still have a great roster of women that are ready and prepared, and we've had a lot of players that have stepped up, and that's what we want to focus on. I'm going to guess that's her answer.
Should we play that for her?
Yes, we can play her my answer afterwards and see, and then she can grade my answer.
We should reverse the tables. Have her ask you that question. Turns out we've already had it
That's
on tape, and I just played for her.
I like that. That's not bad, right? College football, by the way, we didn't talk a lot about it yesterday, but we talked a lot about Indiana. I'd like to give Purdue their flowers because, yes, you know what? You can say it. You can look at what Purdue's done and say, Jake, great. They're 2-0, and they've beaten, they haven't gotten into the meat of their schedule. It gets real for them this week with USC. I get all that. And they may well, was it a year ago when Purdue got out and it was like they're going to take on Notre Dame and we're going to see what's going to happen, and then Notre Dame was up 63-0 after the first quarter, right? And never looked back. I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. But you know what? If you look at where Purdue has been as a program, and you look at the fact that they already, have eclipsed last year's win total, I get it. I get the fact that it's difficult to gauge where they are based on the two games that they've played. And they're not playing anybody that equates to even a mid-major, necessarily upper-tier team. But nonetheless, you can only play the teams that are on your schedule and try to play and be who you want to be and show levels of improvement. And I don't know how overall, none of us know how overall talented Purdue's roster is. But what you want is to see a team that is not going out and underperforming by beating themselves. And so far through two games, I mean, that sounds ridiculous, and it sounds like I'm literally giving a pat on the back to the kid that came home and, like, congratulations, you got a 70 on your spelling test. I get it. But you have to start somewhere. And you know what? Kudos to a group that is still wearing name tags. They have so many new names on that roster for them to go out and get 2 wins. And is that going to be their only 2 wins of the year? Maybe. Maybe. But I don't know much more. Eddie, I get the impression that USC, people that follow and or write about and or support USC, feel equally like enigmatic about their team. I don't know that anybody knows how good USC was thought to be. I mean, Lincoln Riley, when they hired him, and I don't know if you know this or not, but the Board of Regents of the University of Southern California actually owns 74% of the state of Nebraska. Or, excuse me, Oklahoma, because when they hired him away from Oklahoma, they bought, like, literally everything in Oklahoma to get him to come to California.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they bought out his house. They bought everything. They gave everything. They mortgaged everything to bring him to California. And last year was certainly a disappointment for USC, not only because it's the heritage and the tradition of USC, but because of everything they gave up to Oklahoma to get him there. But yet, so you know that this is a great coach and an offensive mind, and they have good talent, but we don't know just how good USC is going to be. I mean, it is weird to think that USC is not even ranked, but yet the branding of USC is like, wow. I think it's a big game for Purdue just in terms of not only the measuring stick, but because they're going up against a franchise or a program, it is a franchise to an extent, that itself is trying to figure out who they are. And that would be, can you imagine, even, I don't care if USC goes 2-10 this year. If Purdue's able to beat USC in Ross-Ade and start out 3-0 with a new coach and all of those new names, that would be big for them.
Absolutely. And to your point about USC, Jake, they got 5th most votes outside the top 25. So that's in the media. So if you do rankings, they were 30th. And then on the other side for the coaches poll, they were 29th. So it's a team that's just on the outside of the top 25. So it'll be a really good test. I don't think USC last year won a single game in the Eastern time zone. I think all of their wins were in Pacific time. I would have to double check that. But yeah, it's going to be a true test again to see how these teams adjusted year number 2 of, being from the West Coast and then flying out and coming to the Eastern time zone and vice versa.
By the way,
how teams respond, by the way, the other part of it, I felt like a lot of the teams that were in the Eastern time zone struggled in that game after and returning back. So how does that play into effect, too, for teams in the Big Ten?
The Big Ten expansion, if you will, okay, it's fascinating to me that already I've seen USC and UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, and I think it was Oregon. I think it was last year when I went and saw Oregon play in Ross-Ade against Purdue. And shortly thereafter, there was an article done that was about Oregon athletics and the travel from the West Coast into the Big Ten area, that they underestimated the amount of, the gear, the support staff, the roster, everything else. They had to take like 2 flights instead of 1. There was more equipment than they expected. And then you get into, and I do realize that when it comes to volleyball or cross country or some of the as we call them, the Olympic sports or the non-revenue sports, they kind of bundle those up. I think there's a popular belief that, say, Oregon, that the track team at Oregon is getting on a plane and flying from Oregon to Maryland on Tuesday and then flying back to Oregon, and then on Saturday flying from Oregon to Rutgers and then flying back to Oregon. They're doing it more in terms of those sports like invitationals, where you go and you're kind of knocking out several rounds of competition within one trip. But even still, I did wonder about, and it's not going to happen overnight, but Oregon, as much as they have a recruiting advantage because of the Nike money and the cool gear and everything else, and the branding of Oregon, and Washington, and, playing in Seattle and Husky Stadium and the gold helmets, and, that's a tradition program. And then UCLA and USC, it goes without saying. But I do wonder if eventually, and I know this sounds crazy, but I have wondered if eventually, once you go through like an entire cycle of players that have gone, even in the NIL transfer era, say 4 years at a respective school, if it doesn't dilute out their recruiting because word starts to travel amongst young people about what a hassle the travel is of playing for a program where the majority of your road games are taking place 3 time zones away. And just, 4-hour flights every single away game, except for the 1 or 2 that you're playing against your other brethren that joined in from the Pac-10. Does that eventually begin to hurt it? And I know I sound like an old man when I say that, but are there young people that are going to be like, I was going to go to Oregon, but I was talking to a guy that went to my high school 5 years ago that was a quarterback for them, and he was saying, like, it was such a nightmare having to constantly get on and fly for 4 hours to play a game. So instead, I'm actually going to go to, insert name of school on the West Coast that plays in a more regionalized conference. And with that, when I think about things that could have impact on players wanting to play in a market, there was something that came to my attention yesterday from not just football and basketball amongst players when it came to this city of Indianapolis. And I hope, because what they were talking about was a while ago, that it doesn't have impact today. But I think it's something that we need to listen to nonetheless. And we will get into that today on the program as well. But when we come back, she is the head coach of the Indiana Fever. They are in action tonight taking on Minnesota, and then it's playoffs for the WNBA and for the Fever themselves. Stephanie White, the head coach, joins us next. have on Coach Stephanie White was because I knew that we were in debt one of the Taylor Swift re-entries because we didn't get a chance upon her request last time, so I just wanted to get that one out of the way. I have nothing against Taylor Swift. I think she's a phenomenal performer. And I know people love her music, but like it ain't my groove, so to speak, right? Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that intro, she is the head coach of the Indiana Fever, who tonight finished the regular season with a game at 7:30. You can hear the pregame at 7:15 with Eddie between the Fever and the Minnesota Lynx. And Stephanie White has her team bound for the playoffs after that. Coach, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Well, I mean, listen, I waded through the Taylor Swift thing there. I got through it just okay, right? I mean, that was okay. I don't think Eddie really played enough of it, though, to really wet your whistle, right?
No. I mean, I can't believe that catchy tune that you weren't singing along.
It's not bad.
It's not Oasis, but
listen. Now, I have somewhat bad news for you here, Coach. I went to the Oasis concert at the Rose Bowl on Saturday night, and I thought the urine flying cups was just a British thing, and it appears as though it's not.
it is not. Oh, yeah. That's really bad.
So if you go to a show to go see Oasis, you don't want to be on the main floor. Up in the stands, you're fine. Down on the main floor, a little bit dangerous.
There's probably as likely of a chance for me going to Oasis as you going to Taylor Swift.
Okay, that's fair. Point taken. Okay, let's get to this to begin with tonight, and that is, you have a situation here that's unique because Minnesota's very good. We know that Minnesota may also, they may have some players that are not available, but there's still a lot to play for. This is not one, because sometimes we see it like at the end of the year where you say, hey, we've got the postseason to get ready for, and so therefore we're maybe going to do things differently or rest or not show everything. But this is a big one for you tonight because you still have seeding that is in play, correct?
That's correct, yes. We got seeding that's in play, and for us, again, continuing to really mesh our new players and be clicking as much on all cylinders as we possibly can heading into the playoffs. So seeding implications, yes, certainly, but also momentum, just continuing to build strong positive momentum with our group.
I was thinking about this with that, okay? And this is going to sound weird the way I ask this, but with so much talk that has been, and I don't mean within your locker room, okay, but the media, the fans, anywhere you turn, with so much of the season conversation being about the question of the availability of Caitlin Clark, as a coach, how did you address to your team so that there is not a resentment of, look, we are defined by who we are, not who we are not? Does that make sense what I'm saying? And how did you balance that to keep the rest of the roster aware of and on task and on point of the fact that you are all professionals that have a chance to win in this league, and you can't pay attention to people worrying and wondering about who's not here?
Well, I mean, we talk about it frequently, just the being able to, for lack of a better term, silence the noise, which it's very difficult to do, right? There's the noise that it's outside the building, outside the locker room, and you really have to make it a point to set boundaries, and you've got to make a point to invest in us and one another. And we've talked about that since the beginning of the season. We knew that there were going to be lots of expectations. We know that there are lots of fans and there are lots of people who aren't fans who aren't WNBA fans or women's basketball fans who have taken an interest in our team. And so for us, it's more about pouring into what's in our locker room. And so we haven't had to have, outside of just continual reminders, constant conversations. I think, and I hope and I believe that, for us, the way that we interact with one another on a daily basis, the way that we prioritize our team over individual, our we over me, and pouring into the relationships on this team, that you get that, and that, and that it's about who's on the floor, just as much as who's not on the floor. But those people who are not on the floor are still very much a part of the fabric of who we are. And I think it's everything from our daily engagement with one another to their daily engagement with their teammates, even though they're not playing on the floor. It's really about relationship and how we've continued to build relationship. And at the end of the day, There are a lot of narratives that are out there in the media and in social media that absolutely aren't true. And because we know them, we know what is true. It's able to keep our players engaged in what really matters.
What player on your roster that is going to be playing for you in the playoffs is the key to your resiliency?
I mean, I don't know if it's any one player. I think it really is the sum is greater than its parts. I think our Aaliyah Boston is a great communicator and connector. Natasha Howard has been a really good leader for our group. Kelsey Mitchell has put us on our back. I think when you have players like that have been on the floor, and then you look at Sydney Colson, who's been a part of championship teams, who is also like a coach on the floor, and now she's on the bench or in practice coaching us on the sideline, and Sophie, who brings energy, and Caitlin, who has been working her way back but still actively involved on the sideline of pouring into her teammates. I mean, all of it matters, and so I don't know if there's any one singular. I just think we have a really good, solid group of women who pour into each other on a daily basis, and that allow us to be better as a unit.
By the way, when you talk about Stephanie White is our guest, she is the head coach of the Indiana Fever. Fever in action tonight, 7:30 pregame. You can start listening to it 7:15 on this radio station. When you talk about seeing narratives that are inaccurate about your team, give me an example.
I mean, I'm not on social media, so I don't really, but, just hearing conversations, I have to tell even my family sometimes, like, I don't want to know everything that's out there. Hey, is this true? Is that true? Is that whatever? So I think that there are often, narratives about whether it's players not getting along or whether it's, who knows what else? I don't know. But it's just, I think it's a byproduct of just our culture right now, in trying to oftentimes create division where there's not division, and utilizing social media to do that. And whether it's the reality of its fans, if it's bots, if it's whatever, not exactly sure. But, for us, I think making sure that our players understand how to create boundaries, how to create separation. The young people don't get off of social media, right? I mean, their brands are associated with social media. Us old people can do that. But to be able to keep the focus and keep the main thing, and the focus is on our group, how we come together, how we continue to build our culture that is going to set us up for championship type of culture year after year.
I do know this. I'm fairly certain of this, Coach. On my social media, anybody that reacts to anything I post, definitely a bot.
Yeah.
I'm convinced
Why are you
of that.
so certain of that?
I'm convinced of that. I'm like, wait a minute, no person's actually responding to this. All right, we're going to do a fun exercise here. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
We thought of a question for you, and then I thought, you know what? Here's how I think you're going to answer said question. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to allow you to answer it, and then I'm going to play for you. Eddie has the audio of me predicting your answer, and then I want you to grade my answer, okay, on Coach Speak. The question for you is this, Stephanie White, and that is, over the course of the season, and in particular the second half of the season, clearly a big talking point around the Indiana Fever was the availability, the health of Caitlin Clark. Now that we have answer to that, even though I know that you would love to have her as a player, are you somewhat relieved to have that answer so that you don't have to continue to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm relieved to not have to answer that question every day, to not have to keep repeating myself. But you're absolutely right. Like, not relieved the fact that Caitlin Clark isn't on the floor for us.
Okay. Now, here's the answer in my Coach Speak that I gave, and then I want you to critique my answer. Maybe it's a little too involved. Here we go, Eddie. Well, Caitlin's a great player, and, I think it speaks to what a great player she is, and it's a testament to her contribution not only in the WNBA, but her place in women's basketball and what she means to this franchise, that I'm asked that a lot. So I understand the questions, and to an extent, it's part of the job, and it's an honor to be able to oversee this franchise that has such a great player on it. But at the same time, we still have games to win, and we still have a great roster of women that are ready and prepared, and we've had a lot of players that have stepped up, and that's what we want to focus on. Okay. How would you grade my answer?
I thought that was pretty good.
It's just
That was
pretty good.
good.
That was. I mean, can I coach? What do you think?
No, I don't know. There's a lot more that goes into coaching than just answering questions.
You know, what is the hardest part of coaching?
You know, it's the challenge of, number one, how you build consistency. I mean, you know, our season isn't as long as the NBA season, but it's still 44 games, and as a coach, you want your players to be at their best every game. And putting combinations of players together that can do that. You can't just put the 5 best players always just on the floor and expect them to have the chemistry and the continuity and the complementary assets to be the best unit on the floor. I think being able to try to stay ahead of the curve and in game planning, execution, offensively, defensively, the chess match that entails that as well. And it's a lot about player management and relationships, and you know, pouring into your players while holding them accountable, understanding what it takes, you know, managing ego. There's all of those things, because every single person in any profession has an ego, or you wouldn't be there, right? And then how do you navigate managing the individual ego and appealing to that, while also collectively the team ego and what is best for the team? And so I think those are all challenging aspects of putting teams together.
I wanted to ask you one other thing. Stephanie White, our guest. I thought about this. I read an article, Stephanie, about Justin Fields, the quarterback for the New York Jets that was, you know, in Chicago before that, of course, Ohio State quarterback. And I'm going to get into this later in the show, but I read an article where he just did an interview about the fact that he had juvenile epilepsy and that he had to deal with seizures when he was a kid. And it jumped out to me because I myself had juvenile epilepsy. And I look back on the time when I was a kid and just knowing that I was a little bit different in that regard. And I've always kind of been proud of it because it made me different, and it was just something, you know, that's part of my story, so to speak. But I was happy that he was talking about that, because it will give young kids, you know, that go through that, somebody to look up to and say, hey, you know what, like I can achieve my goals and whatnot. And so I wanted to ask you, when you were a younger player and a younger athlete, was there either an athlete that you identified with that gave you like an aspiration or a hope, or was there something that you went through as a young person that you look back on and you say that was something that was difficult in the time, but maybe somebody young can learn from what Stephanie White went through?
Yeah, you know, there weren't a lot of athletes that were visible to me as a young player that I necessarily looked up to emulate in terms of women's sports, because women's sports weren't televised like they are now. When I was a kid, you know, that was a lifetime ago. I mean, certainly, you know, I watched the NBA, I watched college basketball, mostly the men, you know, but I think the thing that always motivated me when I was young, number one, I always enjoyed playing sport, but number two, my parents were barely 18 when I was born, and you know, we didn't have a lot growing up. In fact, I've you know, often tell my kids this story about, and I know they roll their eyes like most kids do when their parents talk, but like most of the time growing up, I had one pair of shoes that that had to last me the entire year. Like we just didn't have anything, and I knew that, you know, for me, the opportunity to go to college was likely going to come through other means. And I didn't know that basketball was going to be it, you know. And then when I got into 7th grade, I got my first recruiting letter, you know, for basketball, and it was like, okay, well, maybe this is my way to be able to go to college, to be able to find my way into, you know, a university and get a free education and save my parents. My parents had to work incredibly hard. You know, my mom went back to college when I was in 5th grade. And went on to become a teacher and showed me a lot of life lessons about what that meant for hard work and, you know, handling things as they come, handling adversity, and just didn't have a lot growing up. And so basketball was always, number one, my escape. And number two, the thing that I thought was going to get me to college and get me an education and get me a degree that was going to hopefully propel me to whatever was next. I had no idea what that would be at the time. And little did I know that it would take me around the world and give me this profession and these relationships that I've been able to build because of that. So, you know, I am a quintessential, quote unquote, Hoosier story, coming from a small town, coming from nothing, and being able to fulfill my dreams and then some.
What school was it when you were in 7th grade? Was it Purdue?
It was not Purdue. Louisiana Tech was my first college
Wow,
letter.
that's a big one. I mean, that was a big program.
Yeah, it was.
That's impressive.
It was.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, obviously people are happy that you stuck close to home and ended up at Purdue, and we know the story from there. But tonight, 7:30, story continues against Minnesota. Coach, we wish you the best of luck and in the playoffs as well.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Stephanie White joining us, the head coach of the Indiana Fever. All right, when we come back, I do want to get into that story about Justin Fields because I thought it was interesting what I had read. And Stephen Holder joins us 13 minutes from now, latest on the Colts upcoming. I watched the better part of, and I'm not sure why, but, well, I do know why, because I was on a plane and it was the one game that was available because I think the satellite was was through New York television. So I saw a lot of the Jets-Steelers game on Sunday. And when I say I'm not a fan of, that doesn't mean I don't dislike him as a person. I have never been somebody who was a fan of the teams Justin Fields played on in his career. I mean, obviously at Ohio State, he was, I thought, a phenomenal talent. But he was a phenomenal talent that was playing, being myself a Clemson fan, which is irrelevant to people in this market. But Clemson and Ohio State had some pretty big matchups during Justin Fields' time. So I respected the heck out of his talent. And then, of course, he goes to the Bears, and I know that he was very up and down. But then again, there are times where I'm fairly certain that if you went into a Frankenstein lab with, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Warren Moon, and Michael Vick, you would come out with a quarterback that had no timing and could not run the ball if you, in fact, put him on the Chicago Bears. It just seems like a place where quarterbacks go to disintegrate. But when I watched Justin Fields against the Jets, I thought their offense was fast-paced and exciting to watch, and I thought he looked very comfortable. And it looked like maybe, in fact, there was still some game there. But the article that I saw was Justin Fields talking about the fact that he has or had juvenile epilepsy and suffered seizures as a kid and what a traumatic thing that was. And as somebody myself who had a seizure when I was in the 6th grade and was diagnosed with juvenile epilepsy and was put on medication until the better part of my formidable years, in that moment, you as a young person basically have that is a serious diagnosis to be given. And I'm saying this only in case someone, and I realize right now most young people are in school, but if there are parents listening who just found out their child is going through that journey, it was something that when I look back on, I realize I utilized it to my advantage because it made me different. And I knew it made me different. And I knew that most people didn't know I had that difference, but I knew I had it. And I used it kind of to motivate me or to, even though it was not a huge barrier in my life, I wanted to be able to think that it was so that I had something to overcome. It gave me a hurdle by which to clear. And anybody right now, if you are somebody whose child has been diagnosed with juvenile epilepsy, Justin Fields is the example of the fact that it is a juvenile thing. You do outgrow that. Now, that's not to say that if you are epileptic that there are adults with epilepsy. I realize that. But your body does overcome it. Neurologically speaking, you overcome it. Medication has come a long way as well. But I commended him for coming out and doing that article because I appreciated and could respect the fact of that fear that he had of knowing at a young age that he had something about him as a label that made him different than his peers, even if his peers didn't know it. And, he obviously athletically went to places that very, very, very few people ever do. And so that is the example of the fact that you are not defined by such a thing. And in today's day, if you are a parent with that terrifying diagnosis, I'm here to tell you that it does turn out just fine. Now, that's not to say there aren't cases that are serious and whatever else, but you work your way through it, and it's no different than being somebody who gets canker sores or acne or whatever it might be. It's a part of being a young person that the worst part is the first part. And then after that, it does get better. And I just thought it was when I saw that about Justin Fields, it made me admire his ability that much more. Stephen Holder covers the Colts, ESPN.com, joins us next. Between myself and Stephen Holder, Eddie, which one you actually think is the sharp-dressed man?
Caleb.
Okay. That's Caleb Ziverzuver, who's hanging out with us in here today. He's a coworker, but he's hanging out and shadowing. Usually when people shadow, it's because, Eddie, you spring on me at the last minute you're going on vacation. Are you going on vacation again somewhere?
Next month, yeah.
Next month?
Next month, yeah.
Okay. That's when you're driving to
You can never have too many pitchers in the bullpen, Jake. It's like sunglasses and phone chargers.
Look at you, Eddie, with the query analogies. I like it. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so, on the always busy and shockingly unsponsored guest line, Stephen Holder is with ESPN.com. Stephen, I'm going to begin with this coming off of game number 1 for the Colts, and we'll rehash that in a second. But from an injury standpoint, Shane Steichen oftentimes afterwards will just kind of go over what they found out over the course of a game. Between the game and then yesterday as well, where do we stand in terms of players that may have been dinged up in game number 1?
Well, I think the big one is Shavarius Ward. He is in the concussion protocol, and that didn't really present, or the symptoms didn't present themselves until, I think, Monday morning. So they have sidelined him until that gets resolved. No way to project whether that lingers into this weekend yet or not, but certainly that's going to be a big one to watch, because they also are dealing with Jalen Jones with a hamstring injury. He would be the next corner off the bench, and behind the top 3, which would be Ward, Kenny Moore, and I guess Xavier Howard. And so that injury is problematic too. Just it compounds the Ward situation. So corner was an injury, or was an area of a lot of injuries in the preseason, and we, at least for right now, there's a lot of problems there again. So those are the 2 spots I think you got to watch for as the week goes on.
Okay, here's a wild one, and this is literally, I just have this weird feeling. There's nothing to base this on other than he took a weird hit and then didn't return to the game, but he didn't need to. And that is there any chance we're going to find out that Jonathan Taylor's not 100%?
Okay, so that was asked, and I did not get the sense that there's anything going on there. Shane Steichen said he was fine. He said that they pulled him because the score was kind of lopsided, and maybe he was a little dinged up. There's a difference between being dinged up and being, actually hurt, I suppose, in the minds of NFL people. But I don't think there's any official injury diagnosis at this moment. So we'll see. I saw him in the locker room after the game. He certainly spent a lot of time in the training room, but Taylor tends to do that anyway. He's always one of the last guys out, because he does have a very intense sort of post-game routine. So I think he's okay, unless and until you hear differently.
Again, Stephen Holder is our guest, ESPN.com. All right, Stephen, let's get to the game itself. I'm going to ask this one in elementary form. Did we learn more Sunday about Indianapolis or Miami?
Well, that's a great question, because I don't know. It's actually a tough question to answer. I would say this: the Dolphins were infinitely worse than I anticipated, at least in that game, right? I don't know what they're going to be all season, but in that game, they're infinitely worse than I could have projected. I did think there was a scenario where the Colts could be very good, but they were far better than my wildest expectations. That is certainly true. But I think we probably learned more about the Dolphins. But I'm also not discounting what the Colts did whatsoever. Not at all. Because I think there are some things there that you can build on. That defense is legit. I thought it might be, and I think it is. I still think that. I think a couple of things. Number one, Lou Anarumo has a great knack for timing. Blitzes, stunts and twists, different coverages, like dropping Latu into a zone drop at just the right time. I mean, that's just a knack that a veteran coach, not to call him old, but he's been around a long time, a guy like Lou Anarumo just has a knack for those things. So that's something this defense can build on. And the pass rush was very good too. So I think that's something that you can take with you throughout the season. The other thing I would say is, Tyler Warren is exactly who we thought he was. I had no doubts, but it was certainly confirmation. And the other thing I'd say is, look, when Shane Steichen has a quarterback who he can speak the same language with, he can get a lot out of him. And I think we saw that with Gardner Minshew a couple years ago, and I wondered if this could be a better version of that. And it looks like that is possible, but we'll see. This week 1.
Stephen, when you look, let's go to Tyler Warren. It is my belief, and I want you to tell me if you think that I'm game 1 overreaction type stuff. But I think Tyler Warren is going to be the key, little floating piece in the cell here that everything feeds off of. And they're going to try to establish him early in games with a couple of looks in the first couple of drives, because then defenses have to constantly keep an eye on him more than any other player, and that frees up everybody else more so than any other player that they could do that with. Am I overreacting?
Well, I think there will be games where that's true. It will vary from game to game. So I think there will be games where that player is Jonathan Taylor. Now, that wasn't the case on Sunday, because the Dolphins, as you can see, they shut the run game down, or at least they made it difficult to run. Taylor was, I think, 3.8 or 9 yards per carry, which is not notable at all. He's certainly, for his career, well above 4 yards per carry, maybe close to 5. So I would say that wasn't one of those games for Jonathan Taylor, but I think with Tyler Warren, maybe it was. And this was by design. The Colts came into that game thinking, we have an opportunity to throw the ball. And so who did they come out throwing the ball to right out of the gate? It was Tyler Warren. So I do think there was an effort to do exactly what you just said certainly in the first half, I guess, of that game, and then throughout as well. And he is tone setter, though, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good thinking. He's a tone setter. When he catches the ball, there's more to come after he catches the ball, because now you got to tackle him. So he's a real tone setter, and the kind of guy you want to include into your scripted early plays, because that can get you going.
Daniel Jones looked, I thought, very good. And I said yesterday, Stephen, that Daniel Jones showed why Shane Steichen's an NFL coach and I'm a radio host. And by that I mean he sees all the inner workings. And I think he knew with this offense that Jones is the guy that can hit the layups, and that's what they need, to use Chris Ballard's term. So you got that, check, good. Quarterback play, good. Tight end play, good. We know what Jonathan Taylor is. Michael Pittman, we know who he is. With all of the positives that came that we talked about, who is somebody or an area or aspect on Sunday that you thought was very positive for Indianapolis that got overshadowed by those other storylines?
The offensive line. I really thought they did a good job. Daniel Jones, part of the reason he was so successful, and I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve credit. He deserves a lot of credit. That was a great performance. But let's give everybody credit. That offensive line did a fantastic job. I talked to Shane Steichen last week, and one of the things he told me was, he said, this entire game boils down to whether we can block those guys up front. He was very worried about it. Worried might not be the right word, but he was definitely concerned and wanted to see if they could hold up. He wasn't entirely sure. They did. They held up beautifully. And I think when you look at the two new starters on that unit, there were questions there. And I don't have a lot of questions today, because that was a tough opening matchup for whatever people might think about the Dolphins today, which is not much. I get that. That defensive front, the personnel they have up front, you look at the names there, those are legit guys. And they did not really have much of an effect on Daniel Jones whatsoever. So the other thing that was interesting is I don't know. This might be more of a Shane Steichen thing, or maybe it's a reflection of the Dolphins. I don't know. But I don't know that I've ever seen that many wide open guys. So whatever he was doing to scheme those guys wide open, or maybe the Dolphins are just a complete travesty and can't cover anybody. But for whatever reason, they schemed a lot of guys wide open. That was a fantastic job by Shane Steichen. I got to give him some credit there too. So offensive line and then Shane's play calling, chef's kiss.
Do you, by the way, I noticed you used travesty there. Do you more often than not find yourself using travesty? I mean, is that maybe your safety one? Train wreck or dumpster fire? Which one do you most prefer when describing a team?
I think it's
and Lord knows, Stephen, as the Colts beat writer for the last decade or so, you've had plenty of opportunity for all three.
Yeah, I think I'm partial to train wreck. Yeah, I think I am. And I've had a lot of practice, as you said. I don't find myself using dumpster fire quite as much.
Dumpster fire, I think, is safer because
though.
Here's the thing: dumpster fire, I think, is safer because we've never actually had like human loss due to dumpster fire anywhere, right? I know
right.
of.
No one dies.
Right.
No one dies in a dumpster fire. Right. Train wrecks they can. So it's definitely very insensitive of me to describe the Colts as a train wreck.
There you go. Okay.
Because no one dies when they lose. You just feel like you want to die sometimes, right? With the way they've played over the last 10 years or so.
Based on one game, was there something, and it's been a long time since we've been able to say this, and that is if you were somebody who was a professional dumpster fire seeker, and you were looking at the Indianapolis Colts and you're like, okay, I need to find an area to nitpick that was a negative in game one. Was there one? Was there an area that might have been forecasting that there could be a problem this year, but everything else masked it?
I would say I don't think it's going to be a problem, but you do want to be able to run the ball with a little bit of consistency. They got some better runs as the game went on. I'll give them that. But the Dolphins did shut them down. At the same time, I think you're not surprised by that because that's the kind of personnel they have up front. So the question, if there is one, would be, can this offensive line and the personnel they have and this composition of the offensive line, can this line create the running lanes the way they have over the last few years? And I guess we'll have to wait till week 2 to see if that is true or not.
Somebody asked me this question, Stephen Holder, our guest, and it's a very good question that I wanted to pass along to you. So let's give background to this to begin. The NFL Players Association, is it my understanding, I think this is correct, each team in the league has a player that represents that franchise's players within the Players Association, correct?
Yeah, there are player reps for every team, at least one. I think most teams even have 2.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, there is an executive committee of the union, which is, 8 to 10 guys, something like that. And that is composed of players throughout the league as well.
And Ryan Kelly was on that executive committee while a member of the Colts. He is obviously no longer a member of the Colts. Do we know who is the Colts representative on the NFLPA?
Oh, that's a good question. It tends to change every year, or it can. Zaire Franklin comes to mind, but
Kenny
I'm
Moore,
not 100%
Eddie said?
Sure.
Eddie, you believe it's Kenny
Sorry?
Moore? Is that right?
I thought Kenny Moore did an interview at training camp with the morning show and made mention of it.
Okay.
I honestly I haven't followed up on who it is this year. Sometimes it's more than one guy. I mean, I said Zaire because in the past he has kind of been at the forefront in some union related things, but it could well be Kenny Moore. That makes sense. I honestly haven't followed up for this new season. They usually decide it, I think, in training camp, so that's probably accurate.
Stephen, I know that Chris Ballard and I also know the broken record nature of what I'm about to ask. But I know that Chris Ballard has been very adamant about the fact that Anthony Richardson is not on the trade block. I understand that. But if Daniel Jones, one game does not a season make, but if Daniel Jones is able to play at the efficiency, game in and game out, that we saw in week 1, does that change Chris Ballard's tune?
Too early to say. However, I would say this. When he came out and said he was not trading him, I thought I understood at that point, at least you have to assume at that point, that the uncertainty about Daniel Jones was at least a factor, if not the primary factor. It was at least some factor. The other factor was that Daniel Jones does have some injury history, which they acknowledge. So, there's a little uneasiness about that. But you have to think, watching that game, it's certainly more likely today than it was prior to that game. I mean, I'm not saying it's likely at all. I'm saying it's at least a little bit more likely today, given what you just saw from Daniel Jones. Because a big part of any hesitation in trading Anthony Richardson was, what do we have in Daniel Jones? Because what if you were wrong about him, right? And look, we have 16 games to go. We know nothing. Okay, we really know nothing yet. I warn fans. They come up to you, at Starbucks or Costco, and hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And my advice is always like, let's talk after week 3, just because generally after like 3 or 4 weeks, you start to see the trends, you start to see some, you start to see the identity of players and teams and all that. So we know nothing after week 1. However, it was such a good performance that you have to feel infinitely better today than you did 72 hours ago about Daniel Jones, and that includes the Colts.
What's the last thing that you impulse bought at Costco because you were there and you're like, oh my God, it's like every third time you go in there, right?
Yeah, this is such a stupid thing. I went in there the other day. I buy these protein bars there because that's what I grab a protein bar in the morning and I go to the gym. That's like my old man routine. And so I'm a creature of habit. I'm at that age, right? And so I go in there, no shopping cart because I'm just running in, right? I'm not buying anything. Let me get my protein bars, go through the self-checkout, and I'm out of there in 5 minutes, right? But as I walk in, they've got that shelf right in the front across from the TVs, and it's got all this random stuff. And they had this like 12-pack of toothbrushes. And I was like, these are amazing toothbrushes. Oh my God. I mean, because,
right.
People come over, my daughter has a sleepover or family comes visit or whatever, and everybody inevitably needs a toothbrush, right?
Uh-huh.
And, I'm like, all the toothbrushes are gone.
Hang on. Are you treating your house like a Holiday Inn? Like if kids come to spend the night, they get a free toothbrush out of the deal?
Well, I mean, she's got to pick better friends apparently, because she has friends that I guess don't care about hygiene because they never seem to bring their toothbrush.
Okay.
So all my extra toothbrushes, they're gone. So I said, you know what? This will last us a long time. And they're just, and I got to be honest, they're amazing toothbrushes. So that was an impulse buy, a bargain, like $18, man. I got like 20 of them. It was pretty good.
By the way, do you know how you know that device was invented in Kentucky?
I do not.
Because anywhere else it would be known as a teeth brush. Thank you. I'm here all week, by the way. Yeah, that's not bad, right? That's not bad.
I see what you did there.
And actually, here's the other thing, Stephen, and I've noticed this like, I don't want this to become awkward all of a sudden for listeners or for yourself, but I've noticed when you have gone to Pacer games with me, you have very nice teeth. And I noticed that because primarily when people are in my company, they smile often. And so you're smiling usually when you're around me. You have very nice teeth. So I would say the Costco purchase is paying off not just for your daughter's friends, but for yourself.
Well, yes, my dentist, Dr. Foss, she hates me because I've done a much better job and I haven't had a cavity in a very long time. So
well, there you go. It's paying off then, right?
She's very happy about this.
Okay,
yeah.
It's paying off. I will tell you this, not toothbrushes,
she's not
but
making
rather
any money off of me.
I've got like way too many of the like ankle-high Puma socks from Costco. Like every time I go in and that thing is right there and I'm like, oh man, I need more of them. I've got a lifetime supply, but I need even more.
You can never have too many socks.
That's correct.
That is not a thing.
That is correct.
Not a thing.
Not unlike toothbrushes.
Yeah.
All right, Stephen, we will let you get those pearly whites grinning on ESPN and get back to the regular gig, but we appreciate the time as always.
All right, you got it.
All right, Stephen Holder joining us on ESPN.com. Eddie, yourself, the last time you went to a Costco, what was the thing that you impulse bought?
I don't shop at Costco.
Okay, we're going to do this again. Eddie, just pretending for the sake of the radio theater of the mind, the last time that you were thinking about going to Costco or any sort of wholesale club What is the one thing that you would buy that you normally would not, except for that it's in massive bulk and it's discounted, and so therefore you feel like you need it?
I don't shop at Costco, so I wouldn't know what to buy, Jake. I don't buy things in bulk, so I wouldn't know.
Caleb, did you say you're filling in next week?
I don't know when I'm filling in,
well,
but this is going great.
Yeah, do a class on improv playing along, would you? Just to brace yourself for it, right? Eddie, by the way, you pointed out you got information on the NFLPA.
Shout out to Caleb. He was the one who actually found it. He
Caleb, you want to just
directed
go ahead
me.
and slide in now?
He just looked it up on the NFLPA website. The representative for the Colts is Zaire Franklin, Kenny Moore, co-alternate 1, co-alternate 2, Tyquan Lewis, and this one shocked me a little bit. Co-alternate 3, Alec Pierce.
Now, what does the 1, 2, and 3 mean?
I don't know.
So one's an all. So obviously primary alternate, secondary alternate, and then third alternate. Alec Pierce, Ryan Kelly, by the way, still vice president. I think you might have mentioned that.
By the way, Ted Karras will join us in a couple of weeks. His son is a vice president of the NFLPA with Ryan Kelly.
He's joining us tomorrow, isn't he?
No,
Oh,
a couple of weeks.
okay.
Couple weeks. The only reason why I knew that, Jake, is because he's joining on my birthday,
Oh, really? When's your birthday?
September the 24th. If you're wondering.
And that is birthday number what for you?
Let's see. I was born in 27.
You had to think about that for a second.
Yes.
27, a significant number in pop culture. You know why?
No.
It's not necessarily a positive thing, but I'll tell you next. Eddie, I don't want you to be alarmed by this because you said you're going to be turning 27. But the 27 Forever Club, have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
I mean, it's a little macabre, I realize, but in pop culture, it became kind of a quote-unquote thing between 1969 and 1971 when Brian Wilson, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, there's one that I'm missing here off the top of my head, Jim Morrison. Did I say Jim Morrison? They all passed away at the age of 27. And then later, Kurt Cobain dying at the age of 27 and Amy Winehouse at the age of 27. So, and then there's a number of like actors and, you know, different people within politics or pop culture that have passed away at the age of 27. And now there's been studies that have been done that have said, no, a young person passing away at the age of 27 is no more statistically an anomaly than any other age. It just so happens that you had a handful of them in unusual, obviously anytime at 27 it's unusual.
Well, gee, thanks, Jake, and now I feel great about turning 27.
I'm just saying. That's why I said I don't want you to be alarmed by it, right?
I'll just be looking forward to death now.
But
I better go right up my will.
You know, just so you know, one of the most surreal moments of my life, Eddie, not to turn this totally drab, we'll get back into positive news here in a second, but I've told this story before that when I had my heart attack and was waiting to go, you go into the cath lab, you know, they say like, hey, we're going to have to take you in do a heart cath, but everybody's on call and we've called them to get them all assembled. And I remember thinking like, well, on call from where? Like, where are they coming from? But so I was sitting there waiting. I'm just in the emergency room waiting to go into the cath lab, waiting for them to come get me. And a woman walked in who was an executive, or not executive, but she worked for the hospital, and said, hey, I'm here on behalf of the hospital, and I need to ask you a few questions. And I said, okay. And she said, do you have a living will? And I said, you know, I don't. It's funny you mention that because I've got one of my best friends from high school does that for a living as an attorney, and I keep talking about getting together with him, and I probably should do that. And she said, you probably should have. And that's when I thought, oh, wow, this seems pretty serious. And then, needless to say, that was like the first thing I did when I got out. But you will be fine, Eddie. I promise you that. You will see 28. You'll be fine.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Jeez.
Yes.
I don't know now.
I think your lifestyle is slightly different than that of Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse, and to an extent, Kurt Cobain. Yes.
How would you know?
Okay.
There's a reason why I love going to Seattle so much, Jake.
Okay. Well, okay. Make me walk it back. I'm trying to make you feel better. Fever in action tonight, 7:30, pregame 7:15. It is Indiana and the Minnesota Lynx. Minnesota, the best team in the league, and a team that, you know, we talked about the fact that coming out of the break and their final 12 games, 3 would come against Minnesota. It is the final of those because it is the final regular season game tonight. Stephanie White joined us just about an hour ago on the program and talked about the fact that, you know, here is this opportunity before them. And, Eddie, they are about as battle-tested as a group can get because when you look at what the Fever have been able to do and the rosters that they've been able to put out there, you know, oftentimes you're going with different combinations because they have been so ravaged by injury. And, you know, Caitlin Clark being the key part of that. But Sophie Cunningham, you know, they've had a lot of players go down with injury.
Could that be a blessing in disguise?
What's
kind
that?
of? Could that be a benefit?
That's what I was just going to ask you. You do the pre and post game for each and every game. You see and or listen to all of them. Your thoughts. Could that be in any way a blessing in disguise?
I think at some level it can be, but I also think it could be a detriment just because you don't have a lot of time on the floor together, so you haven't been able to, you know, kind of develop some sort of routine in terms of who's going in at what time. Like with the Pacers, you know, at that first meeting timeout, all right, Pascal Siakam's going to come out, Obi Toppin's going to come in, Benedict Mathurin's going to go in, somebody will go out. Like that's just how it is, at least with the Pacers, because there's familiarity, because there was good health, so players were available. That's not the case with the Fever, where from night-to-night basis, you don't know, first and foremost, what it's going to be like in terms of what is the physicality that's going to be allowed, so you don't know what the foul situation is going to look like from a night-to-night basis. Does Aaliyah Boston have availability in the first quarter because they're not calling ticky-tack fouls on her? Or is she unavailable because she's being called for ticky-tack fouls? Like, there's just so many different things that go into it. And I think it's about halfway in the middle of where I'm at to answer that question, because if you're, Atlanta, or if you are Las Vegas, you don't really know what you're going to be planning for from a game-to-game basis. You have an idea of what you want to execute, but you don't know what Indiana's going to do.
In terms of the Fever tonight with the game and its implication on the playoffs, easiest way to think of this, okay? The Fever do not control their own destiny when it comes to their seeding tonight, because they do need some help. If they lose and Golden State were to win, then the Fever are the 7th seed. If they lose and Golden State is to lose, Indiana is the 6th seed.
Indiana would have to win. If Indiana loses at all, then they are the 7th seed. Indiana has to win tonight. Golden State would have to lose their next 2 games.
Well, it says here, if the Fever lose and Golden State loses, Indiana is the 6th seed.
That is, if I typed that, I mistyped.
Do me a favor. Extend, please, your left hand.
Left hand.
Hold up for the camera here. Extend your left hand, please. Hold it out. Okay. Take your right hand, slap it. Okay, there you go. Slap yourself on the wrist, because that's what you wrote.
I know.
Eddie just changed it.
I just corrected. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay,
if the Fever win and the Valkyrie lose their next 2 games, then the Fever are the 6th seed.
But a Golden State Valkyrie win and Indiana becomes the 7.
Correct. They face Seattle tonight, who is still fighting for playoff positioning. Los Angeles is still in the mix for that 8th seed. If Seattle wins tonight, they are the 8th seed. If Los Angeles loses tonight, Seattle is the 8th seed. But it would come down to their games on Thursday to determine who would be in for that final spot if Seattle loses to Golden State tonight and if Los Angeles wins.
The very high likelihood is that the Indiana Fever will open the postseason against the Atlanta Dream, correct?
Yeah, because Atlanta lost all 3 games to Las Vegas during the regular season series. And the remaining schedule for Vegas is like a cakewalk. They have Chicago, and then I think they may actually have Chicago twice.
Now, the Atlanta-Indiana series in the regular season, they were 2-2, right? They split?
Vegas faces Chicago and Los Angeles. Against who, I'm sorry?
Atlanta.
Yes, Indiana was 2-2 against Atlanta this year.
But they haven't played each other in quite some time.
No, they haven't played since July 11th.
When's the last time you went to Vegas, by the way? You mentioned Vegas.
April.
And you enjoyed Vegas, right?
I do enjoy Vegas, yeah.
Have you seen, 3 weeks ago, everywhere I turned around, there was a different article saying, but nobody's going to Vegas anymore. Is that true?
I'm
Did
not
that
sure.
just become some weird talking point?
There weren't a ton of people when we went there, but also it was April right after
The
right
tournament?
before March. Right after the tournament. So there wasn't a whole lot to do anyway.
I just, when I saw this article, it became this trend. Everywhere I turned around, there was somebody different. Man, Vegas is just dying on a vine. And I'm like, really? I don't know. It always seems like Vegas is packed, but it is expensive. So, maybe people just figured out, you know what? I'm just going to head to the riverboats, or Anderson, for that matter, right? We come back. Last night, something happened that I thought to myself, does this tell us something about the Colts and they didn't even play? I'll let you know what I'm talking about in something that happened last night in the NFL. We'll do it next. You know, the funny thing about this intro, because this is a great song from Tribe Called Quest. And yes, you can kick it. And we're glad that you're kicking it with us. But the Lou Reed cover, I mean, there are so many songs that could become. As soon as that starts, you're like, okay, is this Lou Reed? Is it Marky Mark? Is it Tribe Called Quest? I mean, there are a lot of different, that has to be one of the most sampled songs ever. But it is a great song from A Tribe Called Quest, and Can I Kick It? 239-1070 is the telephone number for the program. It is also, by the way, the text line. And I appreciate every text, and even if it says this, even when it says the following, okay? When Jake interviews the Fever coach, I immediately change the channel. By the way, it's a station, not a channel's television, radio station. The questions are lame. It's super annoying. I would rather stick my head in a beehive. Read this on the air because I know I'm not the only one that thinks this. Here's the thing. If I read it on the air, though, if you've already changed the channel, station, then how would you know that I'm reading it on the air for you? But I thought personally that Stephanie White's answer of speaking about her upbringing and the opportunities that basketball presented for her and the opportunities that it presents for her now was outstanding. So and I get it. You know, here's the thing about doing sports talk radio that is a reality. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I do understand. I get it. In this town, you have the Colts, and I'm going to get back into that and what I saw last night that could relate to them. But you have the Colts, you have the Fever, you have the Indianapolis 500, you have the Brickyard 400, you have the NHRA, you have Butler basketball, you have Purdue basketball, you have Purdue football, you have Indiana basketball, you have Indiana football, you have high school basketball, high school football, you have Notre Dame football and basketball, Indiana State for that matter, the Pacers. There are a lot of different things to talk about in sports talk in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's one of the great, matter of fact, when I worked at Channel 6 and we were because Channel 6 and ESPN were, connected, we fed back before the age of the internet and all that. We were the ones that satellite fed anything that came through Indianapolis that ESPN needed. Channel 6 is the one that supplied it. And I remember the assignment desk editor telling me one time that Indianapolis was the city with the third highest number of storylines that SportsCenter would utilize over the course of a year because of all the things that come through here. So it is true that, as I always say in one of my bad query analogies, okay, it is true that doing there's our bad analogy sounder. That's that fish. Those guys are geniuses. When you do sports talk radio, it's like running a delicatessen. And I totally understand and I totally respect that 95% of the people that walk into the delicatessen want either turkey or ham, which would be the Colts and the Pacers. But occasionally somebody comes in and they want pastrami. Occasionally somebody comes in and they want bologna. And so therefore, occasionally we serve both. And it is my hope that if you are somebody who is here strictly for a turkey or ham sandwich, that you simply wait while the person in front of you gets served pastrami. I totally understand it, and I respect it, and I appreciate people that sit through if it's something that's not of their primary interest in order to then hear or maybe learn about something that's not a primary interest to get back before we get back to their primary interest. But I do understand it, and I don't think I'm not the guy that's going to sit here and say, fine, go listen somewhere else. I don't care. That's not the case. I want everybody to enjoy the show, and so therefore we do a number of different topics. And I do personally think that the vast majority of people enjoy stuff aside from just the primary topic, and I think the conversations with Stephanie White each week, and I thank her for joining us each week, are awesome. Last night, I was watching Monday Night Football, and as I'm watching Monday Night Football, I'm watching J.J. McCarthy, and I'm looking at the Bears, who, have obviously a promising quarterback in Caleb Williams, a number 1 selection. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, are we seeing kind of 2 different variations of what you get in the terms of the Colts? Because Caleb Williams is a big play guy. Caleb Williams is a guy that he absolutely can make plays. He can extend plays. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's a great passer. There are a lot of things about him that made him the number 1 player taken in the draft. When he was at USC, he was dynamic. I mean, his vision in particular was really good. And yet at Chicago, I'm watching that game, and it's like wading through the mud. And then I look at Minnesota, and for the first half of that game, Minnesota was really kind of stuck in neutral themselves. But J.J. McCarthy then throws a pick 6, comes back, and immediately responds and takes a huge step and does so in his debut. I believe I saw something that he is like the first quarterback to have a 10-plus yard rushing touchdown and a 10-plus yard passing touchdown in the same quarter, in the fourth quarter, and et cetera. And he did it in his debut in the NFL. And that is not to say, because I don't believe it to be the case necessarily, that J.J. McCarthy automatically, that means that he is a better quarterback with a better future or more promise than Caleb Williams. I think what you see is that Minnesota has a better supporting cast around and is a more conducive situation for a young quarterback right now for J.J. McCarthy than was the situation that was presented immediately for Caleb Williams. And yes, the roster that is in place right now for Daniel Jones is in fact a roster that is in place for Anthony Richardson because he's still on the team. But it is a different, I think, team than what Richardson had certainly as a rookie. And I think when you add in Tyler Warren and you just look at the way that the Colts want to run their offense and what they anticipate for the way that they're going to look this year, it is one that is better suited. I do think that Daniel Jones is given the keys because of Tyler Warren that are a better situation than even Richardson had 2 years ago. And I think some of that is the reason why I don't think that they had an offense where they said, let's get Tyler Warren or let's get an offense and build it around what we think of Daniel Jones, strong suits. But I think rather they looked at it and said, the strong suits of Daniel Jones maybe are better able to take advantage of what we have around him. And that is, as I keep saying, and you folks are going to get tired of me saying it, but it is hit the layups. They don't need this offense with the talent that it has, doesn't need to rely constantly on just big three-point plays. It can simply do the layups, and I think Jones does that better. But what we saw last night, I believe, was J.J. McCarthy looking very, very good, and people automatically saying, like, here we go. They made the right pick. Minnesota waited on him, and I know that he was a rookie last year, but he sat out because of the injury. So what I'm getting at is it is one game, and it was very easy after that game to make a determination on J.J. McCarthy or against Caleb Williams. But we have 2 quarterbacks in Indianapolis that show you that it is more than just one game. And in the case of Daniel Jones, you've got to hope what we saw in game 1 carries over into week 2. And you probably need to get into mid-October before you see whether, in fact, this is a Sam Darnold rebirth or a flash in the pan. Scott Agnes, by the way, joins us next. 2 o'clock hour underway in Indianapolis. For that matter, the 2 o'clock hour is underway everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison is the producer of this show most of the time. By that, I mean like the 72% of the time that he's not taking off for his neighbor's birthday or simply having Caleb fill in. Caleb is sitting in. That's Caleb Ziverzuver, correct?
Ziverzuver, that's correct.
I noticed, Caleb, by the way, that you rock a lot of Snoopy gear. Are you a big Peanuts guy? Is that it? Is that because you moved here from Minneapolis?
Yeah, well, Charles Schultz, home up in Minneapolis. But no, my uncle was a big Peanuts guy, and I have a lot of hand-me-down gear from him. So
hand-me-down gear from my uncle. Wear it. Okay, fair enough. Do you have a favorite Peanuts character?
I like Linus because I used to have an attachment to my blanket as well. That's my favorite.
What age were you when the attachment to the blanket went away?
It hasn't.
Okay. Yeah, I will. You know what, Caleb? I will confess this to you. I'm 53 years old. I still have my blanket and cow, which was my stuffed animal when I was a kid. I still have both of them.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I don't like snuggle up with them per se, but I do still. They are within my possession. They made the cut of the great cut down of the purge of my gear, the great purge. Yes. Thank you, Eddie. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue from Fieldhouse Files, is Scott Agnes. Fever in action tonight, 7:30 against Minnesota, and then into the playoffs where they, by all account, will take on Atlanta. There are a couple of factors that we went over earlier that could affect their seeding. But let's begin with, Scott, this matchup tonight with Minnesota. The Lynx are also a team that has dealt with some injury. I don't think anybody has to the level of Indiana and what Stephanie White's group has contended with. But the challenge, I guess, we'll start with that, about this particular team to close out the year would be what?
The reality is, Jake, it's unclear right now who on Minnesota will play, right? Nafisa Collier, why would you play her if you're the Lynx and the playoffs are starting this week? And I have not seen an injury report for them for tonight's game. They held shoot around but have not announced that. I would be surprised to see them. They have chosen to sit some players from time to time over the last couple of weeks with a 5-game lead on the 2 seed. On the other side, you're exactly right. The Fever are still playing for spot 6 and 7, and so they very much still have something to play for here tonight.
Do you believe, Scott, that, and maybe I'm just saying this because it's locally, and we cover the Fever. You know, I pay more attention to the Fever than I do other teams within the WNBA. I think that Stephanie White should get a lot of praise for the coaching job she did this year. And I know that people are going to look at it and say, yeah, but that's a team that you had Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, and you know they had higher expectation at the beginning of the year than they did to go, say, 23-20 and eke their way into the playoffs. But when you look at the attrition of roster, to me, she has done top-level coaching this year. But am I simply looking at it myopically?
I would agree. Much like Kelsey Mitchell for MVP, that she should be in the conversation, but it's really hard to overlook with the job they've done with the Golden State Valkyries, an expansion franchise, a team that selected players that most of us did not recognize. Like, why are you drafting them? They leaned in the expansion draft, to be clear. They did not make any big trades. They leaned on foreigners and are in the playoffs and are right now 6th there. But I think Stephanie White should be probably 3rd or 4th in Coach of the Year for all the reasons you laid out. Just, I think so many times, Jake, we overuse maybe within hyperbole, the unprecedented. No, this Fever season and the variety of things that Steph and the entire team have dealt with are absolutely unprecedented, and they've navigated these choppy waters to be in the playoffs firmly.
How have they had to play differently? How, in any way, has their approach offensively changed in terms of style, if at all, over the course of the attrition and the things that they've lost?
Yeah, it's absolutely required some adjustment, and mostly dumbing it down, simplifying, because you're dealing with a lot of players that joined less than a month ago. It was just 1 month ago when you started to have your first of 5 players suffer season-ending injuries, and so they've continued to have to adapt on the fly. I think defensively, some of their coverages, how they're trying to trap, they're still trying to get out in transition offensively and play at that fast tempo. That gives them their greatest advantage, always has been. But I think some of the play calls, you're seeing a lot less pick and roll action. I think Leah Boston, you're not utilizing as much as you would be normally. And you're leaning a lot more on your perimeter guards just to create something and try to make a quick action decision.
Scott, you have covered the WNBA, specifically the Indiana Fever, for how many, and I don't mean consecutively, but for how many total seasons?
Yeah, I've covered it, not at this level daily all the time, but certainly since 2012. And before that, I was around the franchise since 2003. It's just the reality is, go back 3 to 5 years ago, there was very little interest. You would spend 2 weeks on a feature for 500 people to read it. And obviously that dynamic has changed entirely in the last 2 years because of Caitlin Clark.
Well, the thing I was going to ask you is just how has the league itself changed? And I don't even mean necessarily in the interest of it, but as the interest of it has increased, you know, the overall, I guess, competitive nature of the league. I mean, in what ways is the WNBA different today? Or for that matter, are there any ways where it's the same today as it was then?
I would say, no, it's drastically different. I would say the biggest area is more parity. In years past, I feel like it was always 1 or 2 teams kind of every year. Now, that might change from time to time. What 2 teams it was. I think you just have more talent to go around. I think the physicality that a lot of people have been talking about, it has always been there. I don't think there were rivalries, and I think that's more so a systemic thing in all of sports now, as more people root on individuals and follow players much more than maybe teams, perhaps. So I think that is definitely a relation there. I don't see any rivalries really within the league from team to team. And then the other aspect in all this is just how much more it is consumed, how many more games you're playing. And this is the big conversation, Jake, they've got to be having with the collective bargaining agreement, both in terms of how you schedule and breaks given, but also how the players are obviously compensated for. Back when Stephanie was playing and Tamika, it was like 30, 32, 34 games. Well, this year, for the first time, they're up to 44, and they're going to add even more, presumably, with 2 more teams joining the fold as expansion teams next year. So, now about 30 seasons in, I think the changes just continue on down the line and are inevitable with this growing product.
And this is a dumb question. I apologize for this. In terms of expansion of the league, I mean, I think the league, the WNBA, and we've seen this year, Scott, what to me is very intriguing about the league is that because you don't have the high number of teams that you see in other leagues, when a franchise like the Fever this year have to do mid-season acquisition of free agents, there are good players out there that, you know what I mean? It's not as watered down. Where do things stand? And I know that we have 2 new teams coming in, but are they looking to continue to expand, or are we kind of at a cap there?
Yeah, so next year they'll add 2 more. That will make it 15, and they've already promised 3 other spots. Those are staggered out one after one after one. And so you'll have 18 teams here by the end of this 10-year period. I think it's by 2030. I wouldn't be surprised for them to go to 20, let's say. But right now you're set on 18. I just think you might want to get off that odd number, having 9 and 9 or whatever. But 18's a nice round number as well. I just wonder, to your point earlier, you need to expand rosters. That's where the focus needs to be, in my opinion, before you expand these teams, because all the different players that have gone down from that instance, a lot of teams have experienced that, just not at this level and for this duration. Certain teams have experienced where they've had to use the emergency hardship or go to a hardship once or twice a year. The Fever have signed too many players at this point to that level, and that's why you need a development system, I think, as well. A player like Bree Hall, who was drafted by them in the second round. Clearly, there was no room for her on the 12-man roster. But think if she was here from the start of training camp till today, both contributing or around or in this environment where she could develop, and maybe now at the end of the season, she'd be much more comfortable and certainly confident in what her role is in this Fever system and all that, whether she's used or not. I'd like to see the rosters expand to at least 14, maybe 15 players.
By the way, do we need to say 12-woman roster?
I don't know. I've always wondered about that. Like you talk about, what man are you guarding or man-to-man defense.
You're right.
I think we all understand what it references, but I don't know the right answer to that.
That's a good man-to-man. I never thought of that. I mean, it's got to be woman to woman, right? I mean, for what it's worth, I guess semantically, right? I mean, yeah, okay. These are the kinds of things that keep me awake at night, Scott. Right?
I've thought about it. I just don't know who. I geared towards more simplifying and keeping it easy and less changes.
Do you buy into the soccer version of using team names like the plural, like Indiana have won a playoff game as opposed to Indiana has won a playoff game, because it's, to me,
I've always struggled with Fever from that standpoint, I think.
Yeah, the Fever has or the Fever have, right? When you get into it that way.
Absolutely.
These are, again, the things that keep me awake at night, right? For what it's worth.
Miami Heat's the same way, going back to the Pacers' battles with them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean,
the
Heat have won 5 in a row. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
When you look at Scott Agnes, our guest, Fieldhouse Files, where you can read his work, the WNBA playoffs in general, I mean, obviously I know that Minnesota has been the upper echelon team, but is this a league that has, to your point, the parity? Is there the parity there, or do we expect that the Indiana and the Atlantas and those teams, that the odds are really, really stacked against them that they can make playoff noise?
I think I think Minnesota's the clear favorite. Let's put them in tiers. I think Minnesota number one easily. Then after that, I would put your Aces and Liberties, your traditional powers. And then the only other team outside that I could see is sneaking up is Atlanta. So to me, it's really a 3-team playoff race as I look at it. Phoenix doesn't seem threatening. The Valkyries, we know what the Fever have been dealing with here. Keep in mind that Vegas Aces, they were really going through it last month. Like the Fever, if I remember right, they beat them by 30. It might have been the worst opponent I've ever seen played. Think about to the Miami Dolphins this past week. It was worse than that from the Aces. But guess what? Now, since that, Jake, they've ripped off 14 wins in a row, and a team that had won back-to-back championships a couple years ago is the hottest team in the league right now. They're in third in the standings. New York, we know what they can do if they are healthy. But to me, I'd be surprised, given Nafisa Collier's health. Should she stay healthy, it's Minnesota versus everybody.
Scott Agnes, our guest, Fieldhouse Files, have you had a chance to, I don't know how much we've talked about it, but I want to get back into this on the men's side of things, talking about the Pacers. There has been a change on the coaching staff for Rick Carlisle. And I don't know that a lot of people, by all account, it seemed to be a mutual parting of ways. Do we know what has gone into the changes on the bench for Rick Carlisle?
No, not exactly, unfortunately, which is a little bit odd because the timing of it wasn't ideal, right? It was announced by the team basically a month before training camp, after Mike Weiner, you're talking about, was with the team out in Las Vegas for Summer League. And usually any coaching changes are made by July, and then everybody goes on vacation there in August. Mike Weiner was one of his top assistants. He was Rick Carlisle's basically right-hand man. Going back to 2008 in Dallas, he ran the offense. He ran into game situations. He was the one that drew up that spread 4 football play that we all remember, Halliburton knocking down the shot for the win over Milwaukee. And then you bring him in and you replace him with someone that doesn't have a ton of experience. He spent a summer with the Pacers, spent some time at the coaching level at UVA. If anything, my biggest takeaway from this is further belief in Jim Boylan, who was promoted to the front of the bench, and what he has contributed. Obviously, he has Great experience with the Pacers. He won a championship in San Antonio and was a head coach with the Chicago Bulls.
But other than natural cynicism, we have no reason to believe that this was anything other than a mutual part, correct?
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. Just given all the different things here. But we have not been given any evidence to the contrary, and nobody wants to talk about it. So that's a little bit odd as well.
One of the things that I find interesting, Scott, is that the Pacers in the last couple of weeks, I have seen several posts on social media, and they do this with all their players. You know what I mean? Like, hey, it's a Ben Mathurin appreciation post or whatever, that kind of thing. They seem to have sent, and maybe this is me overthinking it, but I've seen a fairly consistent narrative about their appreciation or kind of pumping up Andrew Nembhard. Do you think part of that is just because Andrew Nembhard, as good as he's been, his elevation, his role is going to elevate in terms of how much they have to lean on him, and so they're kind of prepping him, if you will, psychologically for that moment? Does that make sense at all?
It does. I think the number one thing in all this, quite frankly, is the Pacers reached the NBA Finals. Then it went right to the draft like 3 days later, right to free agency, right to Summer League. And ordinarily, the Pacers digital team has about a month and a half, 2 months to roll out into-season reviews for each player. And so they're pumping out one each day leading up here to training camp, if that's what you're referencing with all that. But with Nembhard in particular, I think, number one, the franchise is leaning hard into it because they're going to need his contributions. And the other thing is I think everyone's very curious to see what it'll be like with him having a higher usage rate, with him coming in as a point guard, being so good that they couldn't play him as backup point guard, but instead the off-ball guard in the starting lineup. And now he has much greater responsibilities, and this team's going to go as far as he and maybe Pascal can lead them.
Scott Agnes, our guest from Fieldhouse Files. All right, Scott, I assume you've got plenty of coverage coming up regarding the Fever to end their regular season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got the final game tonight, fan appreciation night, and then we should find out in the next 24 to 48 hours whether it'll be Atlanta or Las Vegas, seemingly. And flight prices aren't cheap either way, unfortunately.
Well, you can drive to Atlanta, right, at the very least. The thing I was going to ask, Atlanta, I know Indiana 2-2 in the regular season. If you were to look at it just in terms of matchups and that was a different group for a large part of it because it's been well over a month since they played Atlanta. But if you were to look at Atlanta and Las Vegas, is there a preference you think for the Fever in terms of which one is a better matchup?
Yeah, all along, leaving Vegas out of this conversation, I've said Atlanta's one of their most difficult matchups just given the physicality and the toughness in the style of play for the Atlanta Dream. But it's hard, Jake, for me to go past and look over the big game experience, the coaching with Becky Hammon. On the other side, it's a rookie head coach. And the fact that they are the hottest team over the last month and a half, right now I would say I'd prefer the Dream over the Aces, given those factors.
All right, we will keep an eye on it and the way that it all pans out. Fever in action tonight, 7:30, 7:15 is the pregame show with Eddie right here on this radio station. Appreciate it as always, Scott.
You bet. Thanks, Jake.
Scott Agnes joining us, Fieldhouse Files. Somebody else had pointed out to me on the morning show that Rick Carlisle may have said that it was a personal matter with Mike, and that's why he moved on. I don't know if that's the case or not, but either way, it did not look like it was some sort of, a negative or an ugly situation between the Pacers and that change that took place. Talked earlier about the Colts and Shane Steichen and Daniel Jones and his decision. And, I made a lot of this yesterday, I realize. But I keep going back to it. I think it's entirely possible, and several people have pointed this out to me, that we are going to, in a month or two, look back on week one and realize, gosh, that was a really big win for the Colts because they got out to the right start in terms of the season. But we were really naive at that time as just to how bad Miami is. And Miami looks, Eddie and I talked about it yesterday, Miami looks like they are in complete disarray. And now you have, Tyreek Hill is back in the news for the wrong reasons in terms of allegations of off-field stuff. the coaching staff looked completely like Dick Vitale used to say, the all-airport team, guys that look good at the airport and then just don't even get it done on the field. I mean, they don't even – Mike McDaniel doesn't even look like he's part of an all-airport team. I mean, like, what are you doing here? He's wearing the sunglasses and just the whole deal and sprinting. Oddities become eccentricities and then become negatives very quickly when you don't get results. And maybe that's what we're witnessing with Miami, and maybe we will look back and say to ourselves, yeah, that seemed great in the moment, but it has not aged well. But a win is a win, and they are 1-0 in the division. Well, I mean, not in the division, but within the conference. But they're 1-0, one of two teams in the division to jump out to that. And it's entirely possible the AFC South is not going to have, like a year ago, Houston got out to that big lead in the division, and they were able to just hold on. And I don't know that this year necessarily there's going to be any of those four teams that just separates totally. So you want to each and every week get any advantage you can against the rest of the division itself. And certainly for the Colts, it gets big with Denver, because Denver coming in, I think we expect that Denver is a better team and is going to be a bigger test than what Miami presented. But then again, they've got a young quarterback as well that maybe you can disrupt with that Lou Anarumo defense and give different looks and keep them guessing and keep them at bay and keep them off guard. But even in thinking about all that and in looking at the division and looking everything with it, I kept going back to the quarterback spot and whether or not Anthony Richardson is a guy, what his contribution is going to be to the Indianapolis Colts and what his place is within the franchise this season and moving forward, and how Daniel Jones changes that relationship. And I know that Chris Ballard has said and is adamant about the fact that Richardson's not going anywhere. I get that. I also get that Ballard kind of has to say that. But what I want to see, and only time will tell. You know, I mean, only time will tell is more than just a great early 80s song from Asia. It's also a clear statement when you talk about the Colts, because only time will tell a couple of things. Only time will tell whether or not Daniel Jones, week one, was the anomaly or the new normal in terms of the way that he can play. And only time will tell whether or not what we saw was a forecast of what they're going to be able to do against Denver or against San Francisco or against Seattle and those teams outside the division they have to face. Or were the Dolphins so bad that we learned nothing from that yesterday and you're right back to square one with not having any idea who and what you are? Only time will tell those things. But there also was one thing that I think, as I mentioned last week, we can go back and we can now look at where all of the hints were dropped and all of the forecast was there and all of the verbiage and messaging was telling us very clearly one thing for certain about this team. And I mentioned that it was like the Sixth Sense, where you then look back and everything makes sense. And then Shane Steichen started answering questions. And he started making comments about different personnel within the Colts. And he said something, and I said, there it is right there. That tells me everything I need to know. And I'll play it for you and tell you what he said next. all about it. Submit right now your resume on LinkedIn if you can play quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts and you think your chances now. Uncle Rico, throw it over them mountains and show up. And they said open competition. And Daniel Jones, the former top 10 pick, the guy that oddly kind of looks like the animation characters in the Kroger commercials. He's going to come in here and he's going to compete with Anthony Richardson, our wonder kid, who's our top 4 pick from a couple of years ago, that when Chris Ballard may or may not have been mandated that now's the time to select a quarterback, he took the kid out of Florida. But we know a little about the SEC because Daniel Jones came out of the SEC as well. And he played in the Bright Lights big city in New York and had success, got a big contract, and then immediately started to regress. But we believe in Indianapolis that Daniel Jones should get another chance because he had nobody that he was throwing to, and he also had the Bright Lights big city, big pressure of the New York media. And Daniel Jones is more of a smaller town guy, likes the smaller feel of Indianapolis. Just more of a laid-back dude. And so we're going to open it up and see who wins. And everybody converged. And I was there doing the show. Usually well after practice was over with and I was alone by myself in a 105-degree field, but I digress. And so everybody's watching and they're analyzing and critiquing and scrutinizing every move and every throw and every piece of footwork. And people are posting it out. Daniel Jones today was 7 of 11 on the 11-on-11 drills. Anthony Richardson went 5 for 5. Really nice throw there with great touch. And then every once in a while, Jason Bean was throw his hat in the ring. Made a nice play. Riley Leonard. Eddie Garrison screaming it from the back, right? Riley Leonard's the guy. That's shelf both of them. Give it to Riley Leonard. QB2. But the whole time, Shane Steichen was trying to tell us. He kept saying, it's not necessarily going to be the guy of everything you see on the field at Grand Park. It's not going to be the guy from everything you see on the field in the preseason games. It's about what takes place organizationally. It's about what takes place in the huddle. It's about what takes place in the meeting rooms. It's about what takes place in the cafeteria in the complex. And yes, they have, eating facilities and all of it. And then after Daniel Jones went out and looked really good against the Miami Dolphins, Shane Steichen was asked to review and critique his quarterback.
I think he earned it quickly with his work ethic. In here, grinding early, always the last one to leave. I think he connected with the guys really well, not only just the offensive guys, but the defensive guys, the way he communicates with those guys. And you walk in the cafeteria, he's eating with the linebacker or whoever it may be and going out with the DBs or whatever it is. So I thought he did a hell of a job earning their trust, connecting with them, and then just the way he prepares and the work he puts in and the performance that he had all through OTAs and into training camp, and to see the performance like he did have, yesterday on Sunday, it was awesome. I wasn't surprised because I know the work he puts in. Mm-hmm. Guys fought for him like crazy, and he played a hell of a game.
Okay. Let's go back to what he said there. He's talking about earning the trust and earning the job of his teammates and of his coaches. And what did he say? Now, he just had a game, did Daniel Jones, where he was very efficient against the Miami Dolphins. And he looked good. And literally, when I asked people for their 3 words to assess game number 1, the 3 words that people said, we have QB. Jones, slightly better. Better than expected. Those kinds of things, right? That's what everybody was going back and forth about. And why is that, you ask? What was it that he did? It wasn't even necessarily what he did as much as what he didn't do. Didn't throw the ball away in terms of interceptions. didn't have costly turnovers, didn't sail it over Tyler Warren's head on a regular basis, didn't underthrow Michael Pittman. The numbers, 22 of 29 with a touch. Okay. But listen again to what Shane Steichen says. I'm going to play it one more time. And I'm going to make notes this time. And I'm going to point out what he doesn't say.
I think he earned it quickly with his work ethic. In here grinding early, always the last one to leave. I think he connected with the guys really well, not only just the offensive guys, but the defensive guys, the way he communicates with those guys. And you walk in the cafeteria, he's eating with the linebacker or whoever it may be and going out with the DBs or whatever it is. So I thought he did a hell of a job earning their trust, connecting with them, and then just the way he prepares and the work he puts in and the performance that he had all through OTAs and into training camp, and to see the performance like he did have, yesterday on Sunday, it was awesome. I wasn't surprised because I know the work he puts in. Mm-hmm. Guys fought for him like crazy, and he played a hell of a game.
Did he mention his footwork? Did he mention his precision? Did he mention his progressions? Did he mention his ability to pick up a blitz? Did he mention his navigation through a defense and finding a fourth receiving option and extending plays? What he mentioned was this: grinding daily, showing up early, last to leave, communicates, eating with the linebackers in the cafeteria, going out with the defensive backs, earning the trust of his teammates, getting guys that wanted to win and fight for him. I'm not saying that Shane Steichen is indicting or calling out Anthony Richardson. It'd be irresponsible of me to say, I don't know that. But what I'm saying is Shane Steichen had a young quarterback that he was assigned and expected to awaken and be a whisperer for, and he tried whispering all the things that Anthony Richardson needed to do. Show up early. Be the last guy to leave. Communicate to your teammates. And eventually he had to start shouting them. And then he shouted them, and he then came to us and said, these are the things I'm talking about. That's organizational leadership. That's doing the things that we, the fans, don't see, that we, the media, don't see, that the season ticket holders don't see. In the lunchroom, in the meeting room, showing up early. And Shane Steichen not being surprised that the teammates were willing to battle for Daniel Jones. He didn't go so far as to say, unlike how I didn't see them fight for Anthony Richardson. And I realize, and I know, and I don't think Anthony Richardson is disliked. I don't. I think guys thought they respected Anthony Richardson. But then you bring in Daniel Jones, and I think there were a lot of guys that thought, actually, you know what? Now I do know what that respect level is. Because I was polling for Richardson, and I wanted him to do well, and he's a nice guy, and he's a mega talent. But I didn't realize what I didn't realize until Daniel Jones got here, and then I saw the things that Jones was doing and realized that's stuff that Richardson wasn't doing. And all of those things that Shane Steichen literally just said in that answer to Matt Taylor, that is the montage at the end of the movie where you realize that Bruce Willis was shivering for a reason. And that was the montage at the end of the movie where you realize that he wasn't actually in the basement watching his wife cheat on him. And that was the montage at the end of the movie when you realize that his wife wasn't upset with him during the birthday dinner when she got up and walked out on the bill. There was a reason for all of it. And the director was trying to tell us the entire movie. And then finally at the end, he just stood up and stood at the front of the movie theater and said, listen, you morons, this is what I'm talking about. And that's exactly what that just was. That was Shane Steichen telling us, this is what I've been telling you all along. It's the stuff you didn't see. And you saw the result of it in game number 1. And now all you got to do is follow it up in game number 2. I have a very important question for Eddie and Caleb. I'll let both of you guys chime in on this if you'd like. Before JMV comes in for our Love Heating and Air crossover talk as we hand it off to John to see what he's got lined up on the program today. I have to, this happens to me like once a year. I'm kind of like Steve Martin in The Jerk with the new phone book. Every once in a while, I like to mix it up and get a different license plate. So my plates are eligible for, I've got to get new plates, right? Now, what's going to be interesting is I just now am ordering them, and the little sticker dealio is up on the 14th. So if the plates don't come quick enough, I mean, I guess you can go into the B&B and take care of this, I realize. But I'll have to drive around with the receipt, I guess, in case I get pulled over, and I can say, no, I did up
well,
time.
I mean, if you get pulled over, they can pull it up, and it'll be up to date in the system.
Got the hassle
but
of getting pulled over. You know what I mean?
Just don't get pulled over, Jake.
Well,
pretty simple.
If they see the sticker, they can pull you over right then if they realize they're expired.
Well, if they run your plate, they would see that it's been renewed.
That's fair. Before they pull you over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the question, though. Do I get one of these specialty plates or just go with the standard? Now, when I say the standard, they have a new option, and it is a couple of bucks extra, of the blackout plate, which is just the all-black license plate. Now, keep in mind, I drive a black car.
So you're saying the specialty plate is cheaper than the standard plate?
No, the standard plate, the specialty plates, I believe, are an additional $40.
Okay, gotcha.
And those are the different. Caleb, by the way, is newer to Indiana by way of Ohio, where he grew up.
And Minneapolis.
That is true.
So the specialty plates, Caleb, are the ones you see that have there's a Colts. Is there a Colts one actually?
There is
Pacers
Colts.
Foundation.
There is Pacers. There's IU, Purdue, Speedway.
Yeah, and then you have different organizations like the Native American Council has one, the Juvenile Diabetes, etc. So, do I go with a specialty plate? Do I go with just the standard blue plate? And by the way, I did one time design a plate for Indiana that they didn't select, and I'm bitter about that. Or do I go with the blackout plate?
Well, knowing you, Jake, first and foremost, what do you have right now?
Standard.
Standard? Okay. So, I mean, you're a special guy, so why not go with the specialty plate?
Which one would I go with?
Well, you certainly got to go with one that, benefits animals, the animal shelter or something like that.
That's a good call. That's a good call.
I like that. I can't see you doing something ordinary. So
Also,
I feel like you got to be doing something.
I'm not going to get a personalized plate, though. I can tell you that.
Also, Caleb, I don't know if you know this or not, but Jake is loaded with that IndyCar job he does. He's got all the money in the world.
Yeah. Don't we wish? The answer is, by the way, I opted for the standard blackout plate. So it's just a black license plate because I have a black car. JMV has arrived. That is a sweet shirt you got on.
Thank you very much. The shop, Broad Ripple, Carmel, downtown off Mass Ave, Brian Kelly, Alex, the Brick Shirt House, right here.
That is a good-looking
Got
shirt.
3 of them, Indiana Staters, right here. This is nice, though.
What's lined up on the big program today,
some guy from Denver, Greg Rakestraw, which would be some guy from Southern Indiana, and then another guy from Southern Indiana, me.
Have you been to Denver?
I have.
You like Denver?
I think I landed there once coming back from Alaska.
You know they got the airport's haunted. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
There's like this, the new one. The new airport in Denver, when they were building it, they had a couple of tragedies that took place, but there's this whole conspiracy that it's like this hiding place for the Illuminati, and people think that it's like this underground dealio.
People love Denver, Colorado. A lot of people from here live there. True story.
You know whose hometown that is? A person very significant in your life, John.
That would be one Shannon Walsh.
Correct. That's her hometown.
Yes.
She went to Columbine High School, for that matter.
Did she really?
Yeah. I mean, before that happened. But yes.
Whoa.
She knew a lot of the people involved in that.
I didn't know she went to Columbine High School.
She did. So did you watch anything last night? Did you watch J.J. McCarthy last night? I thought he was pretty impressive.
Well, here's what I did. Yeah, I did. Everybody crapped on him until the end of the game. The only thing I watched all of the game except I turned over and watched the Rockford Files during the half because I can't watch that crap.
The Rockford Files has, would you agree, the best opening 60 seconds in television?
With the answer machine every time, something different?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
And then the
Yep. So last night, Larry Hagman did a guest star role on the Rockford Files. It was before Dallas started. I think Dallas just was getting ready to start.
If you had to guess Give me the opening year and the closing year that the Rockford Files was on the air.
1974 to 1980.
I would say 74 to 83. Is it 74 to 80?
It is 74 to 80, yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty.
James Garner was very involved in the Speedway for years because he drove the pace car and he was a racing enthusiast.
Do you think he ever had any heeing and sheeing going on in the Speedway Motel?
Here's the thing about him. And obviously well before either of our time of being out there. But the one thing I will say is in talking to different people and being involved in the Speedway, there apparently has never been a better dude.
That's what they say.
Nicer person
That's
to
good to hear.
everyone than James Garner. He apparently was literally the most down-to-earth, just everybody's friend, never met a stranger, totally polite to everybody. I've never heard anything other than he was literally the most decent human being ever.
I believe his daughter's active on social media,
Correct.
too, isn't she?
She follows me on Twitter.
That's awesome.
And I follow her on Twitter, yeah. And she does a lot with animals. I know that. She posts a lot of old pictures of James Garner. For certain.
James Garner in the mid-1980s did what film opposite of C. Thomas Howell?
Not to be confused with Thurston Howell.
C. Thomas Howell.
See, the first thing that came to mind, and I get this confused. I know it's not the correct answer. He feels to me, James Garner feels to me like he would have been in like BJ and the Bear, or what was the other one, like Cannonball Run, or one of those movies, but I know it wasn't that.
He was in Tank. Remember the movie Tank with C. Thomas Howell? I will say this. I'm surprised that we haven't had some kind of reboot of the Rockford Files in some way.
Yeah,
because everything else has been rebooted,
right.
Has it not, to this point?
It's funny, John. When I was just in California, I was driving, and I actually saw a highway patrolman on a bike. On a Harley.
That's awesome.
I'm like, it's Chips.
Did you call him a Chip? You say, hey, John Baker, come over here.
It's Ponch rolling around.
John
right?
Baker was straight at an arrow, and Ponch was out there.
Do you remember when Eric Estrada got in an actual biking accident in like the early 80s, and like it was like
hell
daily updates of it and the whole deal?
The greatest Chips episode of all time is the Roller Boogie episode. Remember where they had all the stars from NBC kind of raising money for a cause, and they were all on, and they were all roller discoing. And it was like Todd Bridges and Dana Plato. Awesome.
They must have filmed it the same day as Battle of the Network Stars.
Well, look it up on YouTube sometime. The roller disco episode of Chips is incredible.
John is up next. He will be with you until 6 tonight, correct?
Yes, sir.
Wearing his Indiana State T-shirt.
And we're brought to you by
Love Heating and Air, 317-353-2141, love-hvac.com. Family-owned business for over 100 years in Central Indiana and official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer. So the heat leaves, that's me, and now John, the cool guy, comes in. That's the way we do it, and we do it next.